Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I'm David Pendergrass. I'm currently working on turning my book into an audiobook, and I thought just for fun, I would give you a little preview. So here is chapter 1 from my book, A Skeptic Challenges a Christian. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. Are you really open-minded? Excuse me, I couldn't help but see that book you were reading. Oh yeah? It's great. It's by a well-respected New Testament scholar, N.T. Wright. It's called The Challenge of Jesus. I can't recommend his works enough. So, you actually believe in all that? Hi, I'm David. Oh, hello. I'm every skeptic you've ever met and read and heard about. Nice to meet you. So you believe in all that? All what? You know, God and whatever. You actually believe in all that? Only on Tuesdays. I'm just messing with you. Yes, I do believe in all that. I'm a Christian, if that's what you mean. A disciple or a student of Jesus of Nazareth. Yes, I do believe in God, and I believe that Christianity is true. Why? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons, really. But the thing that matters the most to me is, and I know this might sound strange or cheesy, my relationship with Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus has changed my life. Yeah, I respect all kinds of great moral teachers. They've had a big impact on me, too. Huh. That's good, I guess. Except I don't just follow Jesus' teachings because of some historical impact he had. I actually believe that Jesus is not dead. I'm convinced he's alive right now. I pray to a living person who actually listens to me. I sing songs to a person who's listening. Whenever I serve others, Yeah, but couldn't you be delusional? Well, of course. What? Of course I must concede that it's possible. You might not exist. I could be dreaming or delusional about you, too. Well, I think I exist. Of course you do. But that's different. What makes you certain you talk to this Jesus? Several things. There's not just one thing that convinces me, but a whole host of, so you don't ever doubt? Doubt? Well, of course, but not often. I also sometimes doubt whether or not my wife loves me, or if my friends like me, or if people can be trusted, or, so if you doubt, then why do you believe it? Well, because I'm scared of the dark. Oh. I'm just kidding. That's a common expression by some popular atheists. They accuse us of being scared of the dark. First, I believe in God because believing in a creator God makes the most sense of multiple things, like the origin of the universe, the origin of multiple constants throughout the universe, the origin of life, the origin of the soul, and the origin of morality. That is, there are certain scientific facts that point to the existence of a creator God. But my faith isn't in science. Scientific facts aren't enough to convince me that, but science has solved all that. Whoa, well, I really disagree, and I'll be happy to chat about it if you'd like. Okay, well, there are still questions, but why can't you just say that we don't know? That's what scientists do. They are comfortable with saying, I don't know, and one day we'll figure it out. Why are you Christians so quick to bring in some outside fairy tale to solve this? It seems so lazy. Well, of course I could just say I don't know. Of course I could. And there's a whole host of things about which I do say I don't know. That is, I don't believe God is a scientific explanation for every phenomenon in the universe. For example, scientists are certain that the universe is expanding. In fact, it's speeding up as it expands. Now, why? Scientists are not absolutely certain, though the current suggestion that is gaining consensus is hypothetical dark matter and dark energy. These are said to constitute about 98% of the universe. Now, I don't know if dark matter and dark energy exist, since there is no absolute, definitive evidence yet. But what I don't do is say that because scientists don't know why it's expanding, it must be God. I don't throw in God every time I don't understand why something is happening in the universe. There are plenty of facts about the universe that we don't understand now that we one day will understand. Yet, there are certain scientific facts which raise special questions. The nature of these facts or questions suggests that they exist because a personal agent caused or causes them. But I'd like to talk about that later if we get to it. But to finish, the second and main reason I'm a Christian is because Christianity has the most historical evidence, which means I believe Christianity's particular truth claims are true. And if Christianity is true, then God certainly exists. Third, I'm a Christian because I've had profound religious experiences with the living Spirit of Jesus. Huh. Well, I believe in science. That's an interesting way to put it. Put what? Well, that you believe in science, as if science were a person in whom you could put your trust. I believe in my wife or my friends, but I wouldn't say that I believe in the laws of mathematics. I believe that science can help us know certain types of truth, but I don't believe in science. Well, I mean that I believe in the fact that science can prove everything about existence. I just believe in things that I can see or can be proven. I don't think you really mean that. Huh? So you don't believe in justice and fairness and beauty and love? Well, sure. Why? You said you only believe in things you can see. What does justice look like? Well, I could never believe in some imaginary Santa Claus in the sky, or since you apparently believe in the Old Testament, a hateful, racist, warmongering tyrant in the sky. You don't believe in Santa? I absolutely concur. Well, besides your faulty understanding of God in the Old Testament, I could never believe in Santa Claus in the sky or a tyrant in the sky. That's what you believe, isn't it? Well, it might be best to ask me what I believe, rather than assume it. I tell you what, I won't assume I know what you believe and why if you won't assume you know what I believe and why. Fair enough. Then why do you believe in God? Well, that depends on what kind of God or which God you're talking about. I don't believe in the pantheist God of Hinduism, Brahman, where the universe is deity, or the life force, Chi. There are numerous gods I don't believe in. I've never believed in the Japanese sun goddess, Amaterasu, the Egyptian god Ra, the Greek god Zeus, the Chinese god Shangdi, and none of the Hindu gods such as Vishnu, Ganesh, or Shakti, and on the pantheon list we could go. So why don't you believe in them? Well, I would be willing to be convinced that they exist, either from logical proofs or compelling historical evidence. Yet, since 1, I do not know of any compelling evidence of their existence, 2, I believe Christianity has the most compelling truth claims, and 3, Christianity does not consider any other gods to exist. Therefore, I do not believe those other gods do exist. Okay, so you do believe in the Christian God. Why? I don't know of any evidence that your God exists. Some evidence of God is circumstantial or implicit, like footprints on the sand serve as evidence that someone has walked there before. Other evidence is based on historical records. Now, before I go into too much detail, I must make this crucial point. I also don't believe in leprechauns. I don't believe in unicorns. I don't believe in fairies. However, and I must be clear, I'm not an a-leprechaunist. I'm not an a-unicornist. I'm not an a-fairyist. That is, I am not convinced that they do not exist. Rather, I am agnostic, that is, ignorant of their existence. I am really, genuinely open to their existence. Not only am I open to their existence, these creatures may exist. They really might. Who knows? Perhaps they used to exist in some remote part of the earth, died off, and then lived on in the legends. Or perhaps we'll discover creatures like them in some remote part of the galaxy on a distant planet. Nevertheless, what I certainly don't do is rule out their existence without any reason because I don't like the idea of them existing. I have no emotional, psychological, or moral reason to disbelieve in their existence. I have no reason to look for reasons for them not to exist. In fact, if someone told me that fairies were more authoritative than I, and that one day a fairy would hold me accountable to everything I did and said in this life, I would most certainly be interested in its existence. The question that matters the most before we ever begin in the discussion of fairies and leprechauns or Zeus or Vishnu must be, am I open to the possibility that there might be actual evidence of their existence? Am I really open to that possibility? Well, it's Christians who are closed-minded, enslaved, really. You believe what you believe because you're afraid of going to hell, right? In other words, there's no way that you're open-minded if you're terrified of going to hell. Again, it's best to ask me what I believe rather than assuming it. And to answer your question, no. I'm not a Christian because I'm afraid of going to hell. I know that most atheist heroes these days, like Dawkins and Hitchens, are begging their audiences to be set free from the shackles of fear. It's just that I don't know of any Christian who is a Christian because of fear. I bet they exist somewhere in the world, but nevertheless, I'm not a Christian because of a fear of death or of hell. Most Christians I've met seem like they've been brainwashed. They just seem so weird. Yeah, I've met some weird ones myself, but I can't speak for all or most Christians. I can speak for myself. I am not brainwashed in a cult. I don't believe in Jesus to have fire insurance, that is, a pass not to go to hell. I don't believe in Jesus to appease my parents or peers. I don't believe in Jesus because I live in America. Okay. To be clear about those things I don't believe in, like Zeus or unicorns, so far, I haven't heard anyone make a compelling case. This is why I don't believe in them. Not because I've ruled their existence before we've begun, or because I've heard arguments that are contradictory, or because I've been presented any evidence that is tenuous and uncorroborated. Rather, no one has presented any type of evidence at all. Nevertheless, I'm still quite open to their existence. In fact, I think it'd be pretty cool if they did exist. Okay. My point is, I'd love to have a conversation about God with you, but I just don't want to waste my time. If you're really willing to discuss this with me, I'd be happy to. However, if you've already made up your mind that there is no way that God exists, and I respect that decision, there's no reason to continue. I need to know that you're really open-minded to the possibility that God exists. If not, you'll dismiss any kind of evidence I give you. Honestly, I'm not that open-minded to it. I've just never heard any compelling reason to believe in a God. I would need extraordinary evidence to believe in such a thing. Honestly, I don't know what extraordinary evidence would look like or mean. If you're not open-minded at all, then nothing I will ever say will convince you. Well, here's an analogy. I have a brother named Stephen. We grew up together. He also has red hair and looks like my mom's side of the family. If Joe the A-brotherist, someone who didn't believe brothers exist, were to come up to me and say, "I know that your brother doesn't exist, so prove to me he exists," I would certainly feel like the conversation is being sabotaged. I'd feel that our conversation would be pointless because he would not listen to any evidence I'd offer. Yeah, I can see that. It'd go something like this. I would say, well, my brother's name is Stephen. Here's tons of pictures of him. Then Joe would say, I can do the same thing in Photoshop. You could say that those are all fakes, or you probably just got those from Google Images. Then I would say, but I'm in the photos too. You see me right there and here and there and this one? And Joe would say, Google Images. I can find people who look like you too on the internet. Then I would say, okay, well, here's his license and birth certificate. Then Joe would say, what? You could say those are all forged. I can make a license right now and forge tons of birth certificates. Or at least I could get someone to do it for me. Then I would say, well, here's a hair sample and a blood sample. Then Joe would say, you could say that you got that from a homeless person a few minutes ago. Then I would say, well, I'm running out of things I would consider evidence. And Joe would say, figures. All you believe in a brother types are all the same. All I ask for is simple evidence and you can't do it. Tell you what, I'll believe you have a brother if you can make him appear right now. I'm sorry, this is impossible. He has a free will and lives down the road a bit. He doesn't move at my bidding. I'm not sure if he's available or if he even wants to come. And Joe would say, I knew it. All I ask is for one simple thing. Just have your brother appear right now. What's the big deal? Or I tell you what, just get your brother to send you a text message right now and confirm he's your brother. Then I would say, okay, give me some time. I type on my phone and I wait. Oh, here it is, look. Then Joe says, that could be anyone. How do you know that's your brother? And I would say, all right, well, let me see if I can get him. And I return back in an hour. Here, let me introduce you to my brother, Stephen. Then Joe says, yeah, right. This could be anyone. You could say that this is that homeless guy who gave you those hair samples and blood types. And I said, wait a second. Ask my brother about my childhood and see if our stories coincide. Then Joe would say, this doesn't prove anything. You could say that you spent the last hour going over stories in collusion. Anyone could make up stories and agree. But I would never do that. No one is that close-minded. Yes, they most certainly are, my friend. A favorite phrase of someone who already doesn't believe is, you could say, with no evidence for that theory or story. I have found it overwhelmingly common that this one phrase is a ploy. It's a red herring. It's meant to get the discussion off track and waste time at best, or at worst, embarrass the person. Are you scared of alternate theories? Is that why you believe in God? Because you've never listened to alternate theories? Of course not. I am open to alternate theories in any field of knowledge. I just want to draw attention to the fact that if you find yourself offering tons of alternate theories or stories with no evidence of that alternate story, it demonstrates you're not open to being convinced. Remember, a theory or story is not evidence. They are not proofs. They're just stories. I will be interested to see in our conversation how often you use that phrase. Every atheist I've ever met counters every single belief, like with my brother's existence, with an alternate story, and thinks this just settles the issue. Remember, a probable explanation is not rendered useless just because you can come up with any other conceivable story of why something happened. Yeah, but I don't know of any serious scientist or thinker who rules out God's existence before the conversation. They just let the evidence lead them to their conclusion. Oh man, I must disagree. Scientists do not always come to their conclusions based solely on the evidence. Their worldview often guides their conclusions. Here's a perfect example. This is a widespread quote by a retired professor of zoology and biology at Harvard University, Richard Lewontin. Quote, "Our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failures to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we have a prior commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods of institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but, on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. To appeal to an omnipotent deity is to allow that at any moment the regularities of nature may be ruptured, that miracles may happen." End quote. Well, now at least he's honest. Dr. Lewontin has let the world know that he and his peers are materialists. It's astonishing that Dr. Lewontin says that the key to being a good scientist is to believe in things that are, quote, against common sense, patently absurd, unsubstantiated just-so stories, and counterintuitive. And theists are called crazy. If he's the pinnacle of open-mindedness, then I'm happy to be called closed-minded. I'm glad there are countless scientists who actually are led by any form of evidence, not pinned down by prior commitments to a worldview. Francis Collins, considered one of the most distinguished geneticists of our time, is a former atheist turned Christian. He was the former head of the Human Genome Project and is currently the director of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services National Institute of Health. He is responsible for the team that mapped the 8.1 billion character code, which is the human genome. I appreciate what he says about his initial considerations of Christianity. When an old Christian woman at a hospital asked him what he believed, he said, "I'm not really sure." He continues, quote, "That moment haunted me for several days. Did I not consider myself a scientist? Does a scientist draw conclusions without considering the data? Could there be a more important question in all of human existence than is there a God? And yet there I found myself, with combination of willful blindness and something that could only be properly described as arrogance, having avoided any serious consideration that God might be a real possibility. Suddenly all of my arguments seemed very thin, and I had the sensation that the ice under my feet was cracking. I determined to have a look at the facts, no matter what the outcome." End quote. I appreciate that he was open-minded. And this reminds me of something else Collins said once. Collins debated evolutionary biologist and outspoken atheist Richard Dawkins in 2006. Dawkins got angry when Collins suggested that the Christian God has no creator. Now remember, Dawkins cannot tolerate any explanation that does not have any other materialistic explanation. Collins' response was appropriate. Quote, "I do object to the assumption that anything that might be outside of nature is ruled out of the conversation. That's an impoverished view of the kinds of questions we humans can ask, such as, why am I here? What happens after we die? Is there a God? If you refuse to acknowledge their appropriateness, you end up with a zero probability of God after examining the natural world because it doesn't convince you on a proof basis. But if your mind is open about whether God might exist, you can point to aspects of the universe that are consistent with that conclusion." End quote. To be open-minded means seeking earnestly for answers. Christians have never had problems with questioning and wanting to understand. Even though we don't have all the answers, we're certainly interested in finding answers. It reminds me of something one of the greatest thinkers in the West, St. Augustine, said in the 4th century concerning interpreting the biblical book of Genesis. He said, quote, "The fact is, you see, people who have a genuine religious interest in learning put far more questions about this text," he means Genesis, "than these irreligious wretches." And these wretches, he's referring to thinkers who are part of a philosophy called Manichaeism. But the difference between them is that the former seek in order to find, while the latter are at no pains at all to do anything except not to find what they are seeking. End quote. What's your point? Perhaps the most difficult question to ask yourself concerning God's existence is, am I genuinely open to the possibility that God exists? Or as Augustine said, are you really seeking to find? Thank you so much for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. If you want to listen to more, go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and look at one of the tabs that says podcast. If you click that, it'll take you straight to my podcast on iTunes, or you can search for it on iTunes if you want to, A Glimpse of the Kingdom. But also on my website, you'll see another way to get, if you're an Android listener on your phone or you just don't use Mac computers. Again, davidpendergrass.com, and click podcast. It'll take you exactly where you need to go, and you can subscribe from there and get this as often as you like, and also see my blogs and so forth. If you want to get me to come to your organization or church, otherwise to do some consulting, you need to go to davidpendergrassconsulting.com. davidpendergrassconsulting.com. You'll see the information there. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, you can find me at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass.